Ma'am, as of this moment, you are legally $350 in debt to me for unpaid back rent. And if you don't settle up, I'm taking your car. That is exactly what I told the woman who had been the absolute nightmare of our subdivision for nearly a decade. And let me tell you, the look on her face wasn't just shock. It was the complete and total shattering of her reality. A moment where the universe stopped making sense to her entitled brain, going from smug superiority to absolute, silent paralysis in the blink of an eye. This woman, who truly believed she could treat my property like her personal overflow parking lot, who handed out fines like they were flyers for a lost cat, and who treated me like something she scraped off her designer shoe, had no idea that her own arrogance had just walked her into a legal trap so perfect, so absolute, that by the time she realized what was happening, she was begging, literally begging, to pay me rent just to get her life back. But to understand how we got to that beautiful, sweet moment of justice, we have to rewind about 3 months, back to when I, Liam, a 34-year-old IT systems architect, was just trying to put my life back together after a divorce that left me emotionally bankrupt and financially bruised. My grandmother, Nana Rose, God rest her soul, had left me her bungalow in Oakwood Estates, a charming, slightly dated 1960s ranch-style home with peeling white shutters and a detached single-car garage that smelled like a mixture of old motor oil, sawdust, and memories. Every time I lifted that garage door, the scent hit me, a wave of nostalgia that reminded me of my grandfather's workbench and the quiet safety of childhood, and honestly, that's all I wanted, just a quiet place to heal, to work, and to figure out who I was when I wasn't arguing over custody of furniture. The house was a sanctuary, except for one glaring, terrifying problem. The Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, and specifically, its treasurer and self-appointed dictator, Brenda Sterling. Brenda was 50-something, with a haircut that looked like a helmet made of blonde concrete, and a soul made of pure jagged glass. The kind of woman who drove a pristine silver Mercedes G-Wagon that had never seen a speck of mud in its life. She didn't just volunteer for the board. She ruled it like a feudal warlord, targeting anyone who didn't fit her magazine cover idea of what a neighbor should look like, specifically targeting single parents, the elderly on fixed incomes, and anyone whose skin tone was a shade darker than her own beige living room walls. My first run-in with the Brenda buzzsaw happened on my 3rd day in the house. I was sitting at my makeshift desk, deep in code, trying to fix a server crash for a client in Chicago, when I heard the low, expensive rumble of a German engine pulling into my driveway. I figured maybe it was a neighbor coming to say hello, maybe bring a casserole, normal human behavior. But when I walked out, I found her Mercedes not just in my driveway, but pulled fully into my open garage, occupying the space where my tools and camping gear were stacked. She was standing there, clutching a leather-bound clipboard, checking her watch, looking at me with this expression of mild annoyance, like I was an employee who was late for a shift. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady because I really didn't want to start a war in my first week. "That's my garage." She didn't even look up from her clipboard at first, and when she did, I was hit by a cloud of perfume that smelled like roses and money, a scent so strong I could taste it. "Emergency board meeting," she said, clipping the words off like she was firing bullets. "The clubhouse lot is full, and your driveway was the most convenient option. I assume you don't mind supporting the community leadership." It wasn't a question, it was a command. I told her I had client equipment I needed to access, that I needed her to move, and she just clicked her tongue, turned around, and started walking away, tossing over her shoulder, "I'll move it when the meeting adjourns. Maybe you should focus on being more of a team player if you want to last in Oakwood." She left her car there for 6 hours, 6 hours where I was held hostage in my own home, unable to get to my server racks, forcing me to cancel a meeting and lose a contract. And when she finally came back, she didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge me standing on the porch. She just reversed out, crushing the gravel, and drove away like she was doing me a favor by vacating my property. That night, standing in Nana Rose's kitchen, looking at the faded wallpaper, I felt this burning knot of anger in my chest, because my grandmother had been a fighter, a woman who marched for civil rights, and here I was, letting some suburban tyrant walk all over me. But Brenda had just made a declaration of war, and she had no idea that she had picked a fight with a man who documents everything for a living. The next morning, The retaliation began. I woke up to find 3 bright orange violation stickers plastered to my front door, stuck there with adhesive that I'm pretty sure was industrial grade. Violation 1. Non-compliant mailbox structure. Apparently Nana Rose's vintage mailbox was too rustic. Violation 2. Improper window treatments, because my blinds were the wrong shade of white. Violation 3. Trash receptacle visibility, claiming my bin was 3 inches past the allowable curb zone. Total fines, $150, payable immediately to the Oakwood Estates Treasury. Each one had a handwritten note at the bottom in aggressive, loopy cursive. Standards must be maintained, followed by a smiley face that looked more like a threat than a greeting. Now, most people would storm over to her house and scream, which is exactly what she wanted because then she could call the cops and play the victim, but I went inside, poured a second cup of coffee, and opened my laptop. I started digging into the HOA bylaws, logging into the resident portal, and that's when I noticed the first crack in her armor. According to the bylaws, every citation required a majority vote by the 5-person board, but when I looked at the timestamps on these fines, they were issued at 7 a.m., unilaterally, with zero record of a meeting or a vote. I called the management company, Prestige Property Management, and after sitting on hold listening to frantic smooth jazz for 20 minutes, I got a hold of a representative named Sarah, who sounded like she had been crying or was about to. When I gave Sarah the citation numbers, there was this long pause on the line, followed by the sound of furious typing. "That's odd," she muttered. "Mr. Liam, these fines were entered by Mrs. Sterling personally, but I don't see any authorization signatures from the other board members, actually. Looking back at the logs, she's been doing this a lot." That was the golden ticket, the confirmation that Brenda wasn't just strict, she was rogue, operating her own shadow government within the neighborhood, bypassing the rules she claimed to love so much. Sarah advised me to demand itemized receipts and proof of the board vote, hinting that if I pushed hard enough, the fines would vanish. But I knew that making the fines disappear wasn't enough, not after she used my garage as a parking lot. That very afternoon, while I was drafting a formal dispute letter, I heard it again, that deep, throaty rumble of the G-Wagon. I looked out the window and there she was, pulling into my garage again, unauthorized, uninvited, and completely unbothered. She parked, got out, and this time she left a note under my windshield wiper that read, "Complaints will be noted in your permanent resident file. Cooperation is expected." She was treating my home like an extension of her own driveway, mocking me while she did it. But this time, I didn't go outside, I didn't confront her, because the day I moved in, I had installed a high-definition security system for cameras with audio, covering every inch of the driveway and garage. I sat there, watching the live feed on my monitor, recording her walking away, capturing the timestamp, capturing the license plate, capturing the sheer entitlement of her stride. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was calculating. I spent that night reviewing the footage, and I realized she had done this before, multiple times when I was out getting groceries, bringing boxes of HOA files and storing them on my shelves, treating my space like her personal storage unit. Nana Rose always said, "Give a fool enough rope and they'll hang themselves." Well, Brenda was weaving a noose out of pure arrogance, and I was just about to kick the chair out from under her. 2 days later, Brenda decided that the orange stickers weren't sending a strong enough message, so she called in her cavalry, a group of 3 women I mentally dubbed the Compliance Committee. They descended on my property like a SWAT team of suburban boredom, armed with tape measures and color swatches. There was Cynthia, who spent 20 minutes measuring the height of my grass to the millimeter, and Patty, who was actually photographing the shadows my solar lights cast on the sidewalk, claiming they created visual clutter. I watched from the kitchen, eating a sandwich, marveling at how much free time these people had, realizing that this wasn't about rules, it was about dominance. By noon, I had another $200 in fines, all signed by Brenda, all lacking board approval. But while they were playing detective, I was building an army. It started with Mrs. Higgins, the sweet 78-year-old lady next door who knocked on my door clutching a binder that looked like it contained the nuclear codes. She sat at my kitchen table, hands shaking, and showed me 2 years of harassment, fines for bird feeders, fines for excessive rose bushes, fines for her grandson's bicycle being visible for 10 minutes. She and her husband had paid thousands to Brenda, just to make it stop. Then came the Garcia family, whose kids were terrified to play outside because Brenda had screamed at them for drawing hopscotch squares on their own driveway. And finally, Colonel Vance, a retired Marine who was being fined $50 a week because his service dog's water bowl was considered an unapproved architectural modification. We were a ragtag group of victims, but sitting there, listening to their stories, something clicked in my brain. I went back to my research, diving deep into state property laws, specifically looking for ways to stop someone from accessing your land. And that's when I stumbled across a legal concept that made my heart stop: involuntary tenancy and adverse possession via storage. The law was incredibly specific. If an individual repeatedly uses a structure on your property for storage or access, with your knowledge, and you do not immediately evict them or call the police for trespassing, a landlord-tenant relationship can be implied by the court. I called up my old college roommate, Marcus, who was now a property lawyer in the city. I sent him the video clips of Brenda parking, the footage of her storing HOA boxes in my garage, and the timestamps showing she had used a key she must have kept from the previous owner or copied illegally, to let herself in. Marcus called me back an hour later, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Liam," he said, "you don't just have a trespasser, you have a tenant. She's established a pattern of regular use. She's stored property there, and she's accessing it with her own key. Legally, you can charge her fair market rent, and if she doesn't pay, you can place a lien on her property, which, in this case, is that fancy G-Wagon sitting in your garage." The plan was set, but Brenda wasn't done escalating. 3 days later, a city truck pulled up, and out stepped Inspector Davis, a man who looked like he had seen everything and was tired of all of it. He told me he had received a detailed report from Brenda Sterling claiming I was running an illegal commercial server farm and an unlicensed auto repair shop out of my garage, citing industrial ventilation and unpermitted electrical grids. It was a lie so bold it was almost impressive. I invited Inspector Davis inside, showed him my single laptop, and pulled up the original 1962 permits for the garage electrical work, proving everything was original to the house. While we were standing there, Brenda rolled up, expecting to see me in handcuffs or my house condemned. Instead, she walked right into Inspector Davis, who was holding her fraudulent report. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "filing false reports with a municipal agency is a misdemeanor, and wasting my time is a personal pet peeve." She tried to stammer something about protecting property values, but he shut her down, warning her that one more fake call would result in a massive fine for the HOA. She shrank, physically shrank, under his gaze, but I knew this was just the appetizer. That night, Marcus helped me draft the document. It was a formal notice of landlord-tenant relationship and demand for back rent. We calculated the daily rate for a secure, private garage in Oakwood Estates, added late fees, administrative fees for the unauthorized storage of hazardous materials, her cleaning supplies, and utility costs. The total came to exactly $350. We sent it certified mail. The delivery notification hit my phone on Tuesday at 9:47 a.m. 40 minutes later, the Mercedes screeched into my driveway. I was ready. I hit record on my phone and opened the door before she could even pound on it. She was purple, literally purple with rage, waving the letter like a weapon. "This is extortion," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I am the president of this HOA. I do not pay rent to people like you." "Actually, Brenda," I said, my voice calm, contrasting her hysteria, "according to state statute 44B, your consistent use of my property for storage and parking constitutes a tenancy at will. You have 7 days to pay the $350, or I will begin eviction proceedings, which involves locking the garage with your vehicle inside until the debt is settled." That's when she snapped. She looked right into my security camera, knowing it was there, and shouted, "I will destroy you. I know people in this city. I will have this house condemned, and I will have you and your little immigrant friends down the street deported." The silence that followed was deafening. She had just threatened the Garcia family on camera. She froze, realizing she had said the quiet part out loud, but it was too late. I just smiled and said, "We'll see about that, tenant." For the next 3 days, she went scorched earth. She called the fire department. They found nothing. She cited Mrs. Higgins for excessive garden gnome joy. She cited Colonel Vance for his American flag being too large. But every time she moved, we were there. The neighbors had formed a text chain, a surveillance network. When she measured Garcia's lawn, Colonel Vance filmed it. When she yelled at Mrs. Higgins, I recorded it. We were building a mountain of evidence, and she was digging her own grave with a diamond-encrusted shovel. She had one move left. She called an emergency town hall meeting for Sunday night, intending to publicly shame me and force a vote to fine me into bankruptcy. She thought she was leading a lamb to slaughter, but she didn't know the lamb had brought wolves. Sunday night arrived with a tension you could practically taste in the air, thick and electric. The Oakwood Estates Community Center was packed to the rafters, standing room only, which was unheard of for a meeting that usually consisted of 3 people arguing about mulch colors. Brenda sat at the head table, flanked by her 2 silent board members, looking like a queen whose throne was wobbling, but who refused to acknowledge the earthquake. She banged her gavel. Yes, she actually brought a gavel, and announced that the meeting was called to address the dangerous and litigious element that has infiltrated our peaceful community, pointing a manicured finger directly at me. Mr. Liam here, she sneered, projecting her voice to the back of the room where a local reporter I had tipped off was standing, has been harassing board members and attempting to extort money through frivolous legal threats. She paused for effect, expecting the crowd to gasp in horror. Instead, silence. I stood up, Marcus's briefcase in my hand, and asked to speak. Sit down, she snapped. This is a board discussion. Actually, Colonel Vance's voice boomed from the back, cutting through the room like a foghorn. Bylaw Section 4. Paragraph 2 states any resident may speak during an emergency session. Let the man speak. Brenda's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson, but she couldn't argue with the rulebook she worshipped. I walked to the front, plugged my phone into the AV system, and said, I'd like to address the allegations of harassment by playing a recording from last Tuesday. Brenda lunged for the cord, but it was too late. Her voice, shrill and hateful, blasted through the speakers. I will have you and your little immigrant friends down the street deported. The gasp from the room wasn't theatrical this time. It was genuine horror. The Garcia family was sitting in the second row, clutching their children. I didn't stop there. I pulled out the file. I have here documentation of Brenda Sterling using my garage as her personal property 23 times. I have sworn affidavits from Mrs. Higgins regarding $3,000 in bogus fines. I have records showing Brenda pocketed fines without board votes. It was like a dam breaking. Mrs. Higgins stood up, trembling but fierce, waving her receipts. She fined me for my husband's wheelchair ramp. Then another neighbor stood up. She fined me for having a too colorful wreath. It was a chorus of 8 years of suppressed rage. Brenda was hammering her gavel, screaming for order, but the revolution had already begun. The reporter in the back was snapping photos rapidly, the flashbulbs blinding Brenda like lightning strikes. One of the quiet board members, a guy named Steve, finally looked at the evidence, looked at the screaming crowd, and looked at Brenda. I motioned for a vote of no confidence, he said into his microphone, and an immediate audit of the Treasury. Brenda looked at him like he had stabbed her. You can't do that, she shrieked. All in favor? Steve asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even her minions, seeing the ship sinking, slowly raised their hands. Brenda stood there, stripped of her power in seconds, looking small and pathetic. That's when I delivered the final blow. I leaned into the mic and said, Mrs. Sterling, you are no longer a board member, but you are still my tenant. You have until midnight to pay the $350 in back rent, or I file the eviction and lien on your vehicle tomorrow morning. She fled the room, the clicking of her heels sounding like gunfire in the stunned silence. That night, at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the deadline, I saw the headlights. She didn't park in the garage this time. She walked up the driveway, looking 10 years older, and handed me a plain white envelope. She didn't scream, she didn't threaten. She just whispered, I'm listing my house on Monday, and turned around. Inside the envelope was $350 in cash. The aftermath was a breath of fresh air. The audit revealed she had been siphoning fines into a consulting fee account for herself. The management company refunded everyone. Mrs. Higgins got her thousands back, the Garcias got their money, and I got my piece. We used the leftover funds from the Brenda regime to throw a massive block party. I watched the Garcia kids drawing hopscotch squares in the middle of the street while Colonel Vance grilled burgers, and for the first time, the neighborhood felt like a home. Brenda moved to a retirement community in Florida, and last I heard, she tried to pull the same stunts there and got sued by a retired judge who lived next door. As for me, I still live in Nana Rose's house. The garage still smells like oil and old wood, but now, it also smells like victory. It makes you wonder, though, was charging her rent petty? Maybe. Was using a technicality in the law to crush her a bit ruthless? Perhaps. But when someone tries to bully the vulnerable, is there really such a thing as too far when you're fighting for your home? What do you guys think? Did Brenda deserve a chance to apologize, or did she get exactly what was coming to her? And where is the line between enforcing rules and becoming a tyrant? Let me know in the comments, because in Oakwood Estates, the only thing we're enforcing now is being a good neighbor. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the trenches of suburbia. Stay safe, and keep your garage doors closed.